Tonight, you are not my husband's daughter. You are a servant." The words slipped from Marissa Harper's lips as softly as silk, but they struck Evelyn harder than any shouted insult could have. Evelyn stood in the narrow back corridor of Winterfong Palace, the gray maid's dress hanging from her shoulders like a sentence she had never agreed to serve. Beyond the closed double doors, the Moon Selection Ball had already begun. Music floated through the stone walls, bright and elegant, carrying the laughter of noble families who had arrived in velvet, diamonds, and hope. Every unmated woman of standing had come to be seen by King Rowan Blackthorn, the Alpha King of the North, the man no one dared disappoint and no one truly understood. Evelyn should have entered through the front doors as a Harper daughter. Instead, she stood beneath a servant's lamp, holding a silver tray of crystal glasses while her stepmother adjusted the pearl collar around Celeste's throat. The pearls had belonged to Evelyn's mother. So had the silver comb in Celeste's golden hair. So had the moonstone pendant resting against Celeste's perfect white gown. Evelyn kept her eyes lowered, because if she looked too long, she might remember the night her mother had fastened that same pendant around her neck and whispered, "A crown does not always begin as gold, my love. Sometimes it begins as endurance." That had been before her father's sudden passing, before the house grew cold, before Marissa locked away every portrait that proved Evelyn had once been cherished. "Do not embarrass us," Marissa continued, smoothing Celeste's sleeve with a smile meant for the world and a warning meant only for Evelyn. "You will pour, carry, clean, and disappear. If anyone asks, you are a hired maid from the outer villages. You will not say Harper. You will not say daughter. You will not look at the king." Celeste turned slightly, her painted lips curving. "That should be easy. Men like Rowan Blackthorn do not notice girls in gray." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the tray, but she said nothing. She had learned that silence could be armor, even when it felt like a cage. At 26, she knew the weight of being reduced in rooms where she had once belonged. She knew how quickly family could become a stage, and love could be rewritten as duty, then erased altogether. The corridor doors opened, spilling golden light across the floor. Heat, perfume, candle smoke, and the low hum of hundreds of voices rushed over her. Marissa and Celeste stepped forward into the glittering hall like royalty arriving for destiny. Evelyn followed 3 paces behind, gray dress, steady hands, invisible name. No one noticed the small silver crescent pin hidden beneath her collar. No one noticed the way it warmed against her skin the moment she crossed the threshold. And far across the grand hall, before anyone announced him, before the music stopped, something in the shadows lifted its gaze. The grand hall of Winterfong Palace shimmered as if winter itself had learned to dress in gold. Chandeliers shaped like frozen branches hung from the vaulted ceiling, each crystal catching the candlelight and scattering it across polished black marble. Banners of the northern clans lined the walls, silver wolves stitched into midnight fabric, watching over the room with silent, ancient eyes. Evelyn moved through it all like a shadow with a tray in her hands, offering glasses to guests who never looked past her sleeves. Their laughter brushed over her. Their perfume clung to her skin. Their careless elbows forced her to step back, then back again, until she found the rhythm of being unseen. It should have hurt less by now. It did not. Across the hall, Celeste floated from circle to circle, glowing in white satin, accepting compliments as if she had been born beneath applause. Marissa stayed close, guiding every introduction with perfect timing. "My daughter Celeste has always admired the North," she told one elder with a polished smile. "She understands duty. She understands grace." Evelyn lowered her gaze as she passed them, but she heard Celeste laugh softly and say, "Some women are simply raised for higher things." The words were not loud, but they found Evelyn anyway. Her hands remained steady. That was the one victory no one could steal from her. She crossed toward a side table near a marble pillar, where the servants refilled trays beneath the watchful eyes of palace stewards. One young maid with tired brown eyes glanced at Evelyn's gray dress and whispered, "First royal ball." Evelyn gave the smallest nod. "Do not worry," the maid said kindly. "In this room, everyone is pretending to be something." The truth of it nearly made Evelyn smile. Then a hush rolled through the hall, not sudden, but deep, like snow falling over a battlefield. One by one, conversations faded. The musicians lowered their bows. Even the flames seemed to lean away from the doors at the far end of the room. Evelyn turned before she could stop herself. King Rowan Blackthorn entered without announcement. He did not need one. He was taller than every man near him, dressed in black formal armor beneath a long, silver-lined cloak, his pale skin made colder by the dark sweep of his hair and the severe calm of his face. He carried no visible anger, no theatrical pride. He carried stillness, and somehow that was more commanding than any roar. Beside him walked members of his council, but they felt distant, almost decorative. Rowan's eyes moved across the room with the patience of a storm choosing where to break. Women lowered their lashes. Alphas bowed their heads. Fathers straightened their daughters' shoulders in silent hope. Celeste stepped forward exactly as Marissa had trained her to do, graceful, bright, impossible to ignore. Evelyn should have looked away. She remembered the warning. You will not look at the king. But as Rowan passed the first row of nobles, the crescent pin beneath Evelyn's collar warmed again, sharper this time, like moonlight pressed against her heartbeat. She took one breath too quickly. Rowan stopped. Not near Celeste. Not near the council. In the middle of the grand hall, with hundreds watching, the Alpha King turned his head toward the shadowed pillar where Evelyn stood with a silver tray and a name no one had allowed her to claim. For one breath, Evelyn forgot how to move. The tray felt heavier in her hands, the crystal glasses trembling so softly that only she could hear the faint music of them touching. Rowan Blackthorn was looking directly at her, not through her, not past her, but at her, as if the entire hall had blurred and she was the only thing left in focus. A strange silence gathered around that look. Evelyn lowered her eyes at once, heat rising beneath her pale cheeks. She told herself it was nothing. A mistake. A king's attention passing over a servant for half a second before returning to what mattered. But Rowan did not move on. Across the room, Marissa noticed. Her smile tightened so quickly it almost cracked. Celeste noticed too, and for the first time that evening, her perfect posture faltered. She stepped into Rowan's path with a practiced curtsy, lowering her head just enough to look elegant without appearing afraid. Your Majesty, she said, her voice sweet and clear. Winterfong honors us all tonight. Rowan's eyes shifted to her. The room seemed to exhale in relief, as if the world had corrected itself. Celeste lifted her chin, waiting for admiration, for a question, for any sign that he saw the future Marissa had spent months polishing into place. Instead, Rowan only gave a brief nod. Lady Celeste. He knew her name because the council had given him lists, portraits, bloodlines, alliances. He knew everything a king was expected to know. Yet his attention pulled away from her almost immediately, returning to the gray figure near the pillar. Evelyn turned toward the servants' table, desperate to disappear, but fate had no kindness for her that night. As she stepped back, an older noblewoman reached for a glass without looking. The edge of her sleeve caught the tray. One crystal tipped, then another. Evelyn moved fast, saving most of them, but one glass slid free and struck the marble with a bright, ringing crack. The sound cut through the hall like a bell. Conversation stopped again. Red wine spread across the black floor in a thin, shining ribbon, stopping inches from Celeste's white gown. Celeste gasped as if tragedy itself had touched her hem. Marissa moved first, her face pale with fury disguised as concern. How careless, she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I apologize, Your Majesty. This girl was hired only for the evening. She is not accustomed to noble company. Evelyn bent immediately, setting the tray down and reaching for a linen cloth from the nearest table. Her hands were steady, but inside, something small and tired folded inward. Hired only for the evening. Not daughter. Not Harper. Not anyone. I am sorry, Evelyn whispered. I will clean it. Celeste's voice drifted down, soft and cruel in its sweetness. Perhaps the palace should be more careful about letting village maids near royal guests. A few people murmured. Some looked amused. Some looked away, which felt worse. Evelyn knelt on the marble, the gray skirt pooling around her, and pressed the cloth to the wine before it could spread farther. The crescent pin beneath her collar burned warmer, but she ignored it. She had survived sharper humiliations than this. She could survive one more. Then a shadow fell over the spilled wine. Evelyn looked up and found Rowan standing only a few feet away. Up close, he was not just imposing. He was unreadable, like a mountain under winter stars. His gaze dropped to the wine, then to the cloth in her hands, then to her face. What is your name? He asked. The question was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall. Evelyn opened her mouth, but Marissa answered before she could. Ella, your majesty. A maid. No one of importance. Rowan did not look at Marissa. His eyes remained on Evelyn. I asked her. The hall went still again, deeper this time. Evelyn felt the hidden crescent against her skin, felt her mother's memory like a hand at her back. Slowly, she rose from the floor. Her voice was soft, but it did not break. Evelyn, she said. My name is Evelyn. The name landed in the grand hall with a quiet force Evelyn had not expected. Evelyn. Not Ella. Not maid. Not girl. Her own name, spoken by her own mouth, had crossed the polished marble and reached the Alpha King before Marissa could bury it again. Rowan watched her as if that single word had changed the shape of the evening. Around them, noble families leaned closer without daring to appear curious. Celeste's smile had become thin and bright, like ice stretched over deep water. Marissa stepped forward, her hands folded neatly at her waist, but Evelyn could see the tension in her fingers. Your Majesty, Marissa said with a careful laugh, forgive the confusion. Servants sometimes grow attached to old family stories. It makes them sentimental. Evelyn felt the room tilt slightly. Old family stories. That was what her mother had become in Marissa's mouth. A story. A rumor. A thing too inconvenient to keep alive. Rowan's gaze finally shifted to Marissa, and the temperature of the room seemed to drop with it. Is she a servant, he asked, or is she attached to your family? Marissa's lips parted, then closed. For the first time that night, she had no ready answer. Celeste moved in quickly, graceful as always, placing one hand over the moonstone pendant at her throat. My mother only means that our household has always been generous. We take in girls who have nowhere else to go. The pendant caught the candlelight. Evelyn's breath caught with it. The moonstone was small, no larger than a quarter, but she knew every pale line inside it. As a child, she had watched her mother hold it near the window on winter mornings, telling her that the stone carried the blessing of northern moonlight. It did not belong on Celeste. It had never belonged on Celeste. Rowan noticed the change in Evelyn's face. That necklace, he said. Celeste brightened, mistaking his attention for interest. A treasured heirloom, Your Majesty. From the Harper line. Evelyn's fingers curled at her sides. She told herself to stay silent, to survive the night, to let the lie pass the way she had let so many pass before. But her mother's voice rose in her memory, gentle and unshaken. A crown does not always begin as gold. Sometimes it begins as endurance. Rowan's eyes returned to Evelyn. Do you know it? Every gaze turned toward her. The hall became a cage made of candlelight and expectation. Marissa gave her the smallest warning shake of the head. Celeste's hand tightened around the pendant. Evelyn's throat felt dry, but she lifted her chin. Yes, she said. The word was barely above a whisper, yet it carried. It was my mother's. Celeste gave a delicate gasp. How dare you? Marissa stepped toward Evelyn with a smile that no longer looked kind from any angle. This is exactly why she was not meant to serve near honored guests. She becomes confused when she sees beautiful things. A few guests murmured again. Evelyn could feel their doubt pressing against her skin. The old instinct begged her to lower her head, to apologize, to become small enough that the moment might pass over her. But Rowan took one step closer, and the movement silenced the room more completely than any command could have. Let her speak, he said. Not loudly, not harshly, but with the weight of a man who had never needed to repeat himself. Evelyn looked at the pendant, then at the crescent pin hidden beneath her collar. With trembling fingers, she reached up and drew it free. The tiny silver moon caught the light, dull at first, then glowing with a soft winter shimmer. Gasps rippled through the hall. On the back of the pin, worn almost smooth by years of hiding, was the same crest engraved on Celeste's pendant, a crescent moon cradled by two northern wolves. Evelyn held it in her palm. My mother was Lillian Harper, she said, each word steadier than the last. That necklace was hers. So was the name you keep trying to take from me. Marissa went pale. Celeste stepped back as if the truth had become visible in the air between them. Rowan looked at the glowing crescent, and something ancient moved behind his silver-gray eyes. The stillness around him changed. It was no longer cold. It was recognition. Lillian Harper, he said softly, almost to himself. The moon-blessed line. Evelyn did not understand why the words made the councilman behind him exchange alarmed glances. She did not understand why the crescent pin grew warmer in her hand, or why every candle in the hall leaned toward her at once. She only understood the way Rowan looked at her now, not like a servant, not like a mistake. like someone the world had hidden, and the moon had finally brought into the light. Evelyn had heard the phrase moon-blessed only once before, whispered by her mother during a thunderstorm when she was 7 years old. Lillian had been braiding her hair by the fireplace, fingers gentle, voice low enough that even the walls seemed invited to keep the secret. Some bloodlines carry memory, she had said, not power to rule over others, but light to remind the powerful what mercy is. Evelyn had not understood then. She barely understood now. But as the crescent pin glowed in her palm and the candles bent toward her like flowers seeking dawn, the grand hall no longer felt like a place built for nobles. It felt like a witness. Marissa recovered first. She always did. A clever trick, she said, though her voice had lost its smoothness. Old silver catches candlelight. Grief makes girls dramatic. Celeste nodded quickly, clutching the pendant at her throat. She has always envied me, Your Majesty. My mother tried to be kind, but Evelyn mistakes kindness for belonging. The lie should have folded Evelyn back into silence. It would have any other night. But Rowan Blackthorne was still watching her, and in his gaze, she found no pity. Only attention. Full, unwavering attention. It steadied something inside her that had been shaking for years. I am not asking for anything that is not mine, Evelyn said. Her voice remained soft, but the hall carried it. Not a crown. Not a place at your table. Not even an apology. I only want my mother's name to stop being treated like something shameful. A murmur moved through the guests, different from before. Less amused. More uncertain. Rowan extended one gloved hand toward Celeste. The pendant. Celeste blinked. Your Majesty? Let me see it. The request was calm, but not optional. Celeste looked to Marissa, and that tiny movement told the room more than any confession could have. Slowly, with visible reluctance, she unclasped the moonstone and placed it in Rowan's hand. The moment the pendant left her skin, its glow faded. It became only a pale stone on a silver chain. Beautiful, yes, but sleeping. Rowan turned, crossed the few feet between himself and Evelyn, and held it out to her. Take it. Evelyn stared at the pendant. Her whole childhood seemed to tremble between them. I should not, she whispered. It was taken from you, Rowan said. Receiving what is yours is not theft. She reached out. The chain brushed her fingers. At once, the moonstone awakened, filling with soft white light that spilled over her hand and up her wrist. The crescent pin answered, brightening until both pieces glowed as one. Gasps swept through the hall. A councilman whispered an old northern prayer. Somewhere near the back, a glass slipped from someone's hand and landed harmlessly on a rug. Evelyn could not breathe. Warmth spread beneath her skin, not burning, not frightening, but familiar, like stepping into a house she had not known she remembered. The pendant lifted slightly from her palm, drawn toward the crescent pin, and for one impossible second, pale lines of light connected them in the shape of a crown. Marissa's face emptied of color. Celeste whispered. No, Rowan's expression did not change, but his eyes did. The cold silver softened into something fierce and almost sorrowful. The moon-blessed line does not answer to imitation, he said. Then, before Evelyn could understand what was happening, the hall doors opened to a rush of winter air. Snowflakes swirled inside, though the night beyond the palace had been clear. They moved around Evelyn first, circling her gray dress, touching her hair, sparkling against her pale skin like tiny stars. No one laughed now. No one called her servant. Evelyn stood in the center of the ballroom with her mother's pendant glowing against her heart, and for the first time in years, she felt seen by more than one pair of eyes. She felt seen by the room, by the north, by the quiet magic her family had tried to bury. Rowan stepped beside her, not in front of her, not behind her, but beside her. Lady Evelyn Harper, he said, giving her the name with the dignity it deserved. You were hidden very carefully. His gaze moved briefly to Marissa and Celeste, and the silence sharpened. But not carefully enough. The words settled over the hall like frost on glass. Lady Evelyn Harper. For years, that name had lived only in locked rooms and forgotten boxes, tucked beneath dust with her mother's portraits and the dresses Marissa claimed were too old to keep. Now it rang beneath the vaulted ceiling of Winterfong Palace, spoken by the Alpha King himself, and no one could pretend they had not heard it. Evelyn stood very still, the moonstone pendant glowing against her heart, the silver crescent pin warm beneath her fingers. She wanted to feel triumphant. Instead, She felt the ache of every year it had taken to reach this moment. Every dinner served from the edge of the room. Every introduction denied. Every time Celeste wore something that had once belonged to Lillian Harper, while Evelyn was told gratitude should be enough. Rowan seemed to sense the weight of it. His voice lowered, meant for her, though the silence allowed the room to hear. You do not have to bow to people who erased you. Evelyn looked at him, startled by the gentleness hidden beneath the cold command everyone feared. Up close, the stories about him seemed incomplete. Yes, he was powerful. Yes, the room bent around him. But there was a loneliness in his silver-gray eyes that felt older than the throne, a guarded sorrow she recognized because she carried one of her own. Marissa drew herself upright, clinging to dignity like a cloak in a storm. Your Majesty, this has gone far enough. Evelyn is emotional. She has always been fragile. The responsibility of noble recognition would overwhelm her. Celeste added quickly, she does not understand court life. She was never prepared for it. Evelyn felt the old shame reach for her, familiar as a hand closing around her throat. Not because the words were true, but because they had been repeated so often that some wounded part of her still flinched before them. Rowan turned fully toward the two women. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Preparation is not the same as worth. Then he looked to the councilmen behind him. Bring the registry of invited bloodlines. One of them hurried forward with a leather-bound book nearly as wide as a serving tray. Pages turned with dry, nervous whispers until the Harper seal appeared in black ink. Rowan read the entry, and his expression hardened into something quiet and final. The lawful daughter of the late Lord Daniel Harper and Lady Lillian Harper is listed as Evelyn Harper. A tremor moved through the crowd. The truth, written plainly, had been waiting all along. Rowan closed the book. Not Ella. Not servant. Evelyn. The pendant flared brighter, and with it, a pale mark appeared around Evelyn's wrist, delicate as moonlight on snow, shaped like a crescent crown. The room gasped as one. Evelyn stared at it, breath caught in her chest. She had seen that symbol only in old stories, painted beside queens who were chosen not by ambition, but by the moon's own will. Rowan saw it too. For the first time that night, something like wonder softened the stern line of his mouth. He removed his silver-lined cloak and placed it over Evelyn's shoulders with careful respect, shielding the gray maid's dress without hiding her. The North has waited for its Luna, he said. His gaze swept the hall, then returned to her. And it was never looking among those dressed to be chosen. It was looking for the one who endured being unseen and still kept her light. Evelyn's eyes burned, but she did not look away. Around them, nobles lowered their heads. Some slowly, some with shame. Celeste stepped back into Marissa's shadow, and Marissa, for once, had no words left sharp enough to cut the truth. Rowan offered Evelyn his hand, not as a command, as a choice. She looked at the hand, then at the glowing mark on her wrist, then at the hall that had watched her kneel and now watched her stand. Slowly, Evelyn placed her hand in his. The candles rose high. Snow drifted through the open doors, bright and harmless, and the grand hall of Winterfong bowed to the maid who had never been a maid at all. For a moment, Evelyn thought the room had gone completely silent because everyone was honoring her. Then she realized the silence had changed. It was no longer awe. It was fear wearing a polite face. Noble families bowed with perfect posture, but their eyes moved too quickly from her glowing wrist to the councilman, from Rowan's hand around hers to the open doors where snow still drifted across the marble. Evelyn felt the shift before she understood it. Recognition had saved her from Marissa, but it had placed her somewhere far more dangerous. Beside the throne, Rowan guided her toward the center of the hall, not pulling, never forcing, his hand steady around hers like an anchor offered to someone stepping onto unfamiliar ice. The silver cloak over her shoulders was warm from him, heavy with the scent of pine, winter air, and something wild beneath the calm. Evelyn kept her chin lifted, though every instinct begged her to retreat into the nearest shadow. She had spent years surviving by becoming small. Now every eye in Winterfong Palace measured her. A councilman with white hair and a narrow face stepped forward, bowing just deeply enough to be respectful. Your Majesty, the mark is undeniable, but protocol requires confirmation before any public declaration is entered into royal record. Rowan's expression did not change. The moon has confirmed what your record books were too slow to notice. The councilman swallowed. Of course, Your Majesty. Still, the court will ask questions. Lady Evelyn was not presented as a candidate. Her training is unknown. Her alliances are uncertain. Her household situation appears complicated. The word complicated landed like a veil thrown over years of cruelty. Evelyn felt Marissa seize the opening. Exactly, her stepmother said, her voice trembling with false concern. I only wish to protect her. Evelyn has lived a sheltered life. She is gentle, but unprepared. Surely the North deserves a Luna who understands responsibility. Celeste stepped beside her mother, eyes shining with wounded pride. I only wanted what was best for our family. Evelyn looked at them, truly looked, and something inside her became very still. Not cold, clear. She remembered carrying breakfast trays while Celeste practiced court dances. She remembered scrubbing candle wax from the chapel floor while Marissa hosted guests with Lillian's silver. She remembered apologizing for taking up space in the home where she had been born. For years, she had waited for someone to name the unfairness. Now the whole court was watching, and the choice to speak belonged to her. Rowan seemed to feel it. He turned slightly, giving her the room without stepping away. Lady Evelyn, he said softly, you may answer for yourself. The old Evelyn would have lowered her head. The hidden Evelyn would have whispered only enough to be dismissed. But the woman standing in Rowan's cloak felt the moonstone against her heart and heard her mother's voice in the quiet between breaths. She faced the councilman first. I was not trained for court because my name was taken from every room where I should have learned it. Then she looked at Marissa. I was not sheltered. I was hidden. A ripple moved through the hall. Evelyn's voice grew steadier. I do not know every custom of Winterfong. I do not know every noble house or every rule written in your books. But I know what it means to be ignored by people who benefit from your silence. I know what it means to keep kindness alive when bitterness would be easier. And if the North needs a Luna who can recognize the unseen, then I have been preparing my whole life. No one moved. Even the snow seemed to pause in the air. Rowan's fingers tightened gently around hers, not to guide her, but to tell her he had heard every word. The white-haired councilman lowered his gaze first. Then, one by one, the other councilmen bowed. This time, it was not polite fear. It was acknowledgement. Marissa's face stiffened as the court turned away from her version of the story. Celeste looked smaller beneath the jewels she had borrowed from a life that was never hers. Evelyn should have felt victorious, but what filled her was quieter. Relief, grief, and the terrifying shape of a future opening before her. Rowan leaned close enough for only her to hear. You speak like someone who was born for more than survival. Evelyn looked up at him, heart unsteady beneath the glowing pendant. I am still learning how to stand where everyone can see me. His silver-gray eyes softened. Then we will begin there. The court remained bowed, but Evelyn could feel the questions rising beneath the silence like roots under snow. A mark could appear in a single moment. Trust could not. She knew that. She had spent too long watching beautiful words cover empty hearts to believe a room changed simply because it bent its knees. Rowan must have known it too, because he did not ask the hall to celebrate. He asked it to listen. Lady Evelyn will be given the respect due to her name and her mark, he said, his voice calm enough to make every word feel carved in stone. No household claim, court tradition, or private ambition will take that from her again. Marissa's face tightened, but she smiled as if she were swallowing glass. Of course, Your Majesty. Our family only wishes to support Evelyn in this unexpected honor. Evelyn looked at her stepmother and felt the old pull of obedience, thin but still alive. Support. Such a gentle word for hands that had pushed her into shadows. Celeste stepped forward with tears bright in her eyes, delicate and practiced. Sister, she said, and the words sounded strange after years of being denied. I never wanted you hurt. I only did what Mother thought was best. Evelyn studied her, the white gown, the borrowed jewels, the frightened pride beneath the softness. Once, she might have accepted the apology just to make the room comfortable. Tonight, she understood that peace built on another lie was only another cage. Then return what was not yours, Evelyn said quietly. Celeste froze. The room did too. Evelyn's voice did not rise. My mother's comb. Her silver prayer book. The portraits locked in the East Room. The winter blue dress she saved for my presentation year. All of it. Color rushed into Celeste's cheeks. Marissa opened her mouth, but Rowan spoke first. It will be done before sunrise. A palace steward bowed and moved toward the servants' entrance with two attendants, not in panic, but in swift royal order. Something inside Evelyn loosened. Not healed. Not yet. But loosened, as if a door long sealed had opened a crack. The musicians remained still, uncertain whether the ball had ended or transformed into something no one had prepared for. Rowan turned to Evelyn, his expression softer when it found her. "May I walk with you?" he asked. Not command. Not claim. Ask. The difference nearly undid her. She nodded, and together they moved toward the balcony doors at the far end of the hall. The crowd parted without a word. Outside, the northern night waited cold and clear, the balcony overlooking miles of black pine forest silvered by moonlight. Snow rested along the stone rail in a clean white line. Evelyn stepped into the open air and breathed for the first time since entering the palace. Behind the glass, the court watched them like a living painting. Out here, the world felt quieter, honest in its coldness. Rowan stood beside her, leaving enough space for choice. "I know what they will say," he said. "That you are untrained. That I moved too quickly. That the moon chose inconveniently." Evelyn gave a small, tired smile. "Did it?" Rowan looked toward the forest, and for the first time, she saw the weight beneath his crown. The moon rarely chooses comfort. It chooses what the kingdom has tried hardest to ignore. She turned the pendant between her fingers, its glow now steady and gentle. "I was ignored for a long time." "I know," he said. The simplicity of it made her chest ache more than pity would have. "But being seen by you does not mean I know how to be Luna." Rowan faced her fully. "Then do not begin as Luna. Begin as Evelyn. The rest can learn to deserve you." For a moment, the girl in the gray dress and the king in the silver-lined cloak stood beneath the same moon, both carrying lives shaped by duty, both uncertain of the future opening between them. Then the balcony doors stirred behind them, and a young steward appeared, breathless but respectful, holding a small carved box Evelyn had not seen since childhood. Her mother's crest was etched into the lid. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Rowan did not touch the box. He simply stepped back, giving the moment to her. With trembling fingers, Evelyn opened it, and the scent of cedar, lavender, and home rose into the winter air. Inside the carved box lay pieces of a life Evelyn had been told to forget. A folded blue ribbon, a tiny silver brush, a pressed white flower, brittle with age. Beneath them rested a portrait no larger than a postcard, painted in soft colors, showing Lillian Harper holding a little girl with pale cheeks, dark, hopeful eyes, and a crescent pin at her collar. Evelyn's breath broke quietly. She had not seen her mother's face in years. Not in a room, not in a frame, only in memory, where grief sometimes blurred the edges. Now Lillian looked back at her from the past with the same gentle strength Evelyn had spent half her life trying to deserve. Tucked behind the portrait was a folded letter sealed with wax marked by the crescent and wolves. Evelyn's hands trembled as she opened it. "My dearest Evelyn, if this reaches you on the night the moon finally calls your name, remember this. You were never born to be hidden. You were born to remind the North that gentleness is not weakness." The words swam through her tears, but she kept reading until the last line settled in her heart. "When they try to dress you as less than you are, stand anyway. The moon will know you." For a long moment, the balcony, the court, even Rowan's quiet presence faded. Evelyn was a child again beside the fireplace, wrapped in her mother's arms, believing the world could be kind because one person had made it feel true. Then she was 26 again, standing beneath the winter moon with a kingdom watching through glass doors and a future she had never asked for glowing on her wrist. She pressed the letter to her chest. "She knew," Evelyn whispered. Rowan's voice was low beside her. "The moon blessed often do." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not only a king who had named her before the court, but a man who understood the burden of being chosen by forces larger than comfort. "I am afraid," she admitted. The words felt fragile, but honest. Rowan did not offer an easy promise. He did not tell her fear would vanish or that the court would love her by morning. He simply said, "Then we will make room for your fear, and you will not have to carry it alone." Something in Evelyn's chest softened, not into trust completely, but into the first small shape of it. Behind them, the balcony doors opened again. The white-haired councilman stepped out and bowed deeper than before. "Lady Evelyn, Your Majesty, the hall awaits your return." Evelyn glanced through the glass. The nobles stood in lines now, quieter, sobered. Marissa remained near the far wall, no longer commanding the room. Celeste held no borrowed jewels. The portrait of Lillian had already begun its work without speaking. Evelyn closed the carved box and held it against her heart. Rowan offered his arm, but waited. Always waited. This time, Evelyn stepped forward on her own and placed her hand lightly on his sleeve. Together they returned to the grand hall. The gray maid's dress still showed beneath the royal cloak, and Evelyn did not hide it. Let them remember. Let them see where she had stood before they bowed. At the center of the room, Rowan faced the court. The moon selection ball is ended, he said. The north has found its Luna. No cheers came at first. Only silence, deep and reverent. Then the oldest matriarch in the room lowered herself into a full bow. One by one, every noble followed. Evelyn stood beside Rowan beneath falling candlelight, her mother's pendant glowing steadily, her own name restored in the mouths of those who had tried not to speak it. She had not become powerful because a king chose her. She had become visible because she finally refused to disappear. And as dawn touched the palace windows with pale gold, Evelyn Harper lifted her chin, no longer dressed by shame, no longer owned by silence, and stepped into the north as its Luna.